So now we're going to dive right into the next question, which is, you wrote the system is still not clearly understood and applied. What exactly do you mean by that? And can you share some examples?
Well, we're in a transition. Right now, we're still in the midst of the mass production system. And there are a lot of forces keeping us in that system. So when I said that it's not fully understood, we have to understand who am I talking about. I think the people that are responsible for implementing it, the people that write about it, they understand the system, but there are many other important and influential people that have an impact on how we produce, the method we use, and that is a little bit less frequently understood by those people. I'm talking about maybe in a company, within a company, a CFO or the sales department, the VP of sales in the company, right? Maybe outside of a company, I'm talking about elected officials, those kind of people that are on the periphery but still are influential. And what is specifically not understood is that the Toyota production system solves problem that could not be solved before. Okay. In the previous, I have to probably go a little bit back and explain a lot of the history.
Yes, please.
It's important to understand. Okay.
Absolutely.
Before we invented any production system, we were basically hunter-gatherers. So we were basically dependent on nature's efficiency. It's essentially survival of the fittest. But that wasn't good enough for mankind. So we decided to basically design efficiency. And so the moment we designed efficiency, we are bringing some economic notion of efficiency into the system. And that means that we created money, first of all, right? And then where before it was basically a trade, bargaining type of society, there was no money. So there was no financial aspect of the production system, okay? The second part of it is that there were tribes cooperating for hunting and gathering, so there was no labor relation. There was no employee and employer, right? And then finally, they were just using the land without the land being owned by anyone almost. So the management of natural resources from the land to the mineral and all that was really not any important. But the moment we begin to design the production system, and the first one we designed was craftsmanship, then those economic notions became important, and the notion of efficiency became very central. And then we moved, so we had basically craftsmanship from 6,000 BC, all the way to the late 1700s. And in the late 1700s, we begin to harvest energy, control energy, we invent machine, and it's the birth of the mass production system, right?
Right.
As we know it today. But what we have to realize is that in this designed type of production method, there are trade-offs. There are big trade-offs. And so if I give you an example of a trade-off, for instance, in the craftsmanship era, flexibility conflicted with affordability and availability. So in the craftsmanship era is all about an expert, a craftsman, being able to do something. So they were very flexible because they were very skilled people. And when somebody came to them for a good to be made, they were able to make it, but it wasn't affordable. It was very expensive because all the cost was essentially labor, and it was not scalable either. All right. From a social point of view, I think people were pretty happy in that environment because the creative nature of mankind wasn't in conflict with the production method. In other words, people had a craft and they felt a sense of self-worth because of that craft. Also, when it comes to the environment, there was very little impact on the environment because the method didn't take a lot from the environment. There was no pollution. But then the problem, what were the problems, right? The problem is that we couldn't scale up the production, so we still had famine, scarcity, right? Only few goods were available to rich people. Makes sense? So when the mass production came on, we solved some of those problems, but we created new ones.
Right.
Okay? So, for instance, machine became very important. We were able to make product less expensively, so products became very available and very affordable, but the flexibility of what to make became less obvious. In other words, it was now made by machine, and machine are not flexible, right? At the same time, the labor took a back seat. The machine was now the most important asset, and people went to work without expertise. They parked their brain out the door, and they basically were paid for moving boxes and pushing buttons. So the social social environment, the labor relation began to conflict with the nature of mankind. And so we have the birth of the unions and so on and so forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the impact on the environment is huge. We know it today.
Yes.
We have increased our living standards, but there is a trade-off, right? And the trade-off is pollution and a planet that may not be even there for our grandchildren, right? So anyways, so what I'm saying is that the previous production system we invented, they were better than the previous one, but they still had trade-offs, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so the biggest thing that needs to be understood about the Toyota production system is that Toyota eliminates some of those trade-offs. And that's a big deal